If you haven't watched the first part, this isn't the place for you. Go watch it, I'll leave the link below the video. Then continue with us to follow the story. If you are in a noisy place, leave the video for later when you can be in a place where you can wear headphones and relax. And now, let's begin. I opened my eyes slowly, almost choking from the stench surrounding me. Around me was a forest of feet and legs, lying on the ground among these crowded feet. The smell of dirty feet, the smell of blood, the smell of festering wounds, the smell of the ground that hadn't been cleaned in a long time, the heavy breaths of people standing close together. I soon learned, through a process of inspection and counting, that there were 86 of us. I examined the ceiling of the room and estimated that its area was no more than 25 square meters. Conversations between people were whispered, which created a continuous buzzing that hovered over everyone. I wanted to stand up to get some air. Excruciating pain throughout my body. I braced myself and endured, and when I tried to stand on my feet, I screamed in pain. People around me noticed, and several hands reached out, grabbed me from under my armpits, and lifted me. I stood supported by the hands. A young man standing next to me said, "Be patient, my brother, be patient. It's a hardship that will pass." Another said, "Whoever is with God, God will be with him. Do not despair, my brother." With the movement, the pain subsided a little. I looked around, men, young people, and there were children 12 and 13 years old. Old men, elderly. I turned to the man who had just tried to encourage me and asked him, "Who are these people? Why are we here? Why are people standing?" The man looked at me with a bewildered expression as if to say, "How can I explain what is obvious?" He replied with a question, You don't know what's happening in the country?" While I was in France, I had heard news about political unrest happening here and that there was a party called the Muslim Brotherhood that was involved in some violent incidents here and there. But I didn't pay any attention to this news. It remained vague, and I didn't know the details. I was never interested in news broadcasts or organized political work, even though, during high school and afterward, I was somewhat close to some Marxists and influenced by their ideas, especially the ideas of my uncle, who seemed to hold an important leadership position in the Communist Party. I replied, "No, I swear, I don't know. What's going on? Why aren't you living in the country?" I wanted to end all his questions, so I answered him all at once about everything he might ask. No, I was living in France, and today I came. I looked at my watch. Only 14 hours. Damn, you have a watch. Hide it, brother, hide it. See, all the people here, they are the best of the believers and defenders of Islam in this country. It's a test, brother, a test from Almighty God. I interrupted him, having reached a great sense of the strangeness of my situation, feeling wronged and distressed. I said, angrily, "Okay, what do I have to do with it? I am a Christian, not a Muslim, and I'm an atheist, not a believer." This was the second time I declared myself an atheist, and it was also pretentious. The first time cost me a meal from Ayyub's bamboo stick, ordered by Abu Ramzat, who slaughtered Muslims because we live in an Islamic state. As for the second time, it would cost me many years of absolute isolation and being treated like insects, or even worse. I saw my interlocutor as if he jumped back, and because we were cramped, only his upper part moved, and spontaneously he said, "I seek refuge with God from the accursed devil." Then, in a louder voice, he said, "Hey, guys, there's a Christian infidel here. We have a spy among us." A group of eyes turned toward me. At the same time, I heard a voice coming from behind me, a commanding voice. Who is that raising his voice? "Quiet, quiet. Oh God, it's time for the shift change." I couldn't grasp the situation. In the far part of the room, there was a group of people lying on the ground, aligned in a strange but orderly manner, as if they were a set of tobacco rolls lined up in a box. Between the lying people and us standing, there was a third group, a group crouching on the ground. After the large man spoke, everyone stood up and gradually took over the corner where we had been. We crouched. The third group went to the sleeping area. I learned that he was the head of the dormitory. The three groups moved within moments, and the sleeping people. Oh God, Sif, all the sleepers were sleeping on their sides. It turned out that Sifing meant sleeping on your side. The first lay against the wall on his side, his back to the wall. The second lay in front of him, placing his belly against the other's belly, each with his head at the other's feet. The third lay on his side and put his back against the second's back. The fourth placed his belly against the third's belly, and the heads were always at the feet. The sleepers continued in this pattern until the row reached the second wall of the room, and there were still 6 or 7 people with no space. The head of the dormitory shouted, "Oh God, Cabes, it's your job now." The second large man got up calmly. He seemed like a wrestler. He went to the first man lying against the wall and quietly placed his feet between the wall and the lying man. He leaned his back against the wall and began pushing the sleeper with the solace of his feet. He pushed more, and the sleepers compressed slightly, creating enough space for another man. He called one of those remaining, "Come on down here." The man lay down on his side between Cabes's feet and the first man's feet. Cabes then began pressing on the new man, and once again made space for another. "Come on down here," then more pressing and another man. In the end, all those who previously had no space were accommodated. Cabes returned to his place with the same calmness, dusting off his hands. I watched the sleepers. Some of them fell asleep immediately. I spent 3 days in that room. I heard that some had spent many months there, both before and after my time, and in some cases, the number exceeded hours. During those days, I became very familiar with the room. After sitting in a crouched position for a little while, I felt the need to relieve myself. I turned to my neighbor and asked him, "Where does one relieve themselves?" He turned his face away from me and did not answer. I asked another neighbor, and he also did not answer. I remembered that I was labeled as a Christian, infidel, and spy, and these accusations would continue to haunt me. My location was close to the head of the dormitory, so I asked him, and he pointed me to the toilet. So there was a toilet in the room. I had to wait for more than an hour. 1 toilet, 1 water faucet, and 86 people. I returned to my spot. There was some movement above. I looked up. The sewage pipe, which seemed to serve the entire building, ran across the room from one end to the other, with about half a meter between the pipe and the ceiling. Above this pipe, 2 boys, each about 15 years old, were sleeping. Each hugged the pipe with his hands and chest, their legs dangling below, while their heads rested on the sound of the water flowing inside the pipe. "In my life, I've never slept better than in this position," said one of them on the second day, April 22nd. I woke up. After 8 hours of crouching, it was our turn to lie down. Some of the crouched ones with experience advised each other to go to the toilet before lying down, because if you lie down and Cabes finishes his work, no matter the reason you get up from lying down, you will lose your place. I lay down with the back of one man pressed against my back and another man's belly on my belly. I remembered my girlfriend, who loves the French position. Behind my head were 2 feet, and in front of me, 2 feet. How can a person sleep with this smell? Yet I slept deeply, and now I've woken up, fully awake. Everything in my body is compressed, but the pressure on my lower abdomen is intense and almost painful. It seems that my front neighbor's bladder is full, making his member stiffen and naturally press into my stomach. In such circumstances, it would be shameful to think of any other possibility. I tried to shift him, but couldn't. With each movement, it pressed more. I heard him snore and thought about reaching out despite the difficulty, but I feared he would wake up at that moment. What would he say if he woke up and found his member in my hand? I managed to slip out of the lying position with difficulty and went to the toilet. 3 nights and 3 times a day the door opened and closed. Each time the door opened, food was brought in containers they called kayat. In the morning, each person received a loaf of marku bread with a piece of halva. These 2 items were distributed by the head of the dormitory, along with 5 containers of a black liquid that turned out to be tea. The same happened in the evening. The container went from person to person. They lifted it, took a sip, and passed it to the next person. At noon, the containers were filled with bulgur with a container of tomato paste containing some vegetables. I will never forget how people snatched pieces of meat the one time they brought meat. I thought that even the morning and evening meals, without the head of the dormitory, would turn the dormitory into a jungle. During these hours, which seemed to me as long as an eternity, I felt like I was floating in time and space. A desire that seemed to me like a firm belief that all this was nothing but a silly mistake that would end soon. My professional and artistic sense lay in a distant corner, observing but not intervening. This sense remains outside the realm of pain and anxiety, always alert and neutral, no matter the degree of my mental or physical pain. It observes and records. I remember a saying by one of my distinguished professors: no matter how small an event is, a good director can make a good film out of it. The event is the skeleton, and it's up to the director to clothe it with flesh and garments. This sense captured the scene of the meat snatching and felt the glaring contrast between the surrounding environment, which called for nausea or at least a rejection of everything, and the physical act performed by those snatching the meat. What causes these people to lose their sense of propriety and taste, and thus their dignity and human pride? Is it the struggle for survival? It could be. For 3 days and nights, I ate half a loaf of bread with a piece of halva. On April 23rd, I woke up. The second lying position, sleeping on the floor, was slightly better. I woke up before the end of the 8 hours and didn't feel like getting up. I dreamed that I had had enough sleep but continued to enjoy relaxation and luxury. My place was near the head of the dormitory. I could hear his conversation with Capes. The guard opened the small window in the door, and I wished I could stretch a little. I wished for a cup of coffee and a cigarette. Above the door, the head of the dormitory jumped and had a long conversation with the guard who opened the window. The head of the dormitory returned and whispered to Capes, "There are large batches coming from the provinces and our people. Today or tomorrow, they will be transferred to the desert prison." Capes responded with surprise, "Oh, what are they going to put everyone in prison?" "Yes, there's no one left outside the prison." "Shh, don't let anyone hear you. It's not our business." The head of the dormitory and Capes were imprisoned for smuggling. In the evening, when our group moved from standing to crouching, I intentionally crouched close to the head of the dormitory. I waited until just before the 3rd meal and, with a face I tried to keep cheerful, said to him, "Sir, excuse me, may I speak with you about something?" "Sir, from where to where did you make me a sir?" "Yes, what do you want?" "Sir, there must be a mistake." "Where is the mistake?" "Sir, I am not a Muslim to be a Muslim Brotherhood member. I am Christian. Why was I put here? Why was I brought here in the first place? I don't know. Look, my friend, everything is messed up. There's no one responsible for anyone here. Can you please tell the prison chief or someone in charge about this? I want to see the prison director." "Enough, enough. The guard will come now, and I will tell him this." I heard the click of the lock. The head of the dormitory stood up. I grabbed his hand and said, "Please don't forget to tell him." He nodded and opened the door. The food was brought in. The head of the dormitory addressed the guard. "Sir, we have someone here saying." The guard interrupted quickly, saying, "What?" "I don't know anything. I'll send the shift supervisor to you." After about half an hour, the door clicked again. A handsome man appeared, speaking with a heavy regional accent, What do you have, head of the dormitory? The head of the dormitory pulled me by the shoulder, and I stood up. He said, tell him, Sir Abu Rahmi. I stammered and explained the situation. In the same heavy accent, Abu Rahmi responded, so, what do you want me to do? Christian. Yes, and if you're Christian, maybe you help the Muslim Brotherhood, for example. Maybe you sent them weapons, for instance. So you're worse than them, huh? Then he turned to the guard and ordered him, close the door or close the door. Before the guard could close the door, Abu Rahmi turned to the people in the dormitory and said loudly, no, you're not even Muslim Brotherhood. You're Brotherhood devils. Show us your skills. There's a Christian here. So get to work with him and convert him to the true religion. You're only good at killing and ruining this country. He slammed the metal door shut with force, but soon reopened it with a wide smile on his face. All eyes were on him as he continued, devils, if you manage to convert him to Islam, don't forget to organize him with the Muslim Brotherhood. Otherwise, he'll remain a prisoner of your damn dogs. He closed the door forcefully, the third lying position. My rear neighbor had a broad and large backside, which was both annoying and comforting. It was better than those with protruding bones that dig into your body mercilessly when pressed. My front neighbor was a young man in his 20s who didn't seem particularly religious. Sleepy eluded me after Abu Rahmi's talk. There was great hope inside me that someone would discover the mistake and immediately correct it. But after this conversation and the uncertainty of being sent to the desert prison, despair and fear of the unknown fate mixed within me. After 2 or 3 hours, I'm not sure, I began to drift off, exhausted and weary, then woke up gradually. I felt discomfort. As I became more awake, I realized that my feet were restrained. My feet had swollen from the cane strikes. I woke up more, feeling warmth and moisture rising from my feet, and a bit of pain too. I felt a movement and jolted awake. I looked up and saw that my front neighbor, the young man, was holding my feet with both hands and had placed my big toe in his mouth, sucking on it. I nudged him, then nudged him again. His hands relaxed, and he pulled his head away. I continued nudging until the young man woke up completely. He looked at me with anger and disbelief. Sharply, he said, "What woke me up? What woke you up? Can't you see what you're doing? Damn you! You interrupted my best sleep. What were you dreaming about?" Yes, I was with Maysoon, and at the moment I held her and she held me, and we began. You woke me up, and who is Maysoon, if you don't mind? Maysoon is my fiancée, Maysoon. Sorry. Don't take it personally. Go back to sleep, but don't confuse my toe with Maysoon's lips. I couldn't sleep after that. Questions and questions. What kind of world am I trapped in? Is this just the beginning? But where to? Can any writer, screenwriter, or director imagine such worlds? Questions chasing questions. For 13 years, I felt my heart nearly leap out whenever I heard the key rattle in the iron door. I couldn't get used to it. The rattling of the key at unexpected times made me jump. The head of the dormitory jumped up the moment the door opened. Abu Rahmi and a tall man in his 50s wearing white glasses entered, followed by about 20 guards. The man with the glasses said, "Where is the head of the dormitory?" "Here, sir." Quietly and systematically, they ordered everyone outside to buy 2, leaving only me and the second smuggler. "Where is the second smuggler?" "Here, sir, stay here to God." And we left to buy 2. It was dawn on April 24th. Our hands were shackled behind us, and our ankles were chained together with another prisoner. We walked with difficulty, stumbling through corridors and stairs. Our names were recorded on lists. The man with the glasses left us standing for a few minutes while he carried the lists, then returned. He seemed important. Why not explain the situation to him? He approached me, and I hurriedly said, "Sir, just one word. Shut up." A resounding slap. Thousands of bright stars exploded before my eyes. It was a spring dawn. I staggered. I was silent. They dragged us outside the building. I saw for trucks with metal cages. The prisoners called these trucks meat trucks. They might have been called that because they resemble the trucks used to transport slaughtered sheep from slaughterhouses to butchers, or because prisoners are lined up inside them like carcasses in real meat trucks. A metal staircase with 3 rungs was set up. We climbed up with difficulty due to the chain legs and the inability to use our hands. They made us sit on the floor of the truck. The truck filled up, and the door was locked with a large padlock. 2 security personnel sat in front of the door from the outside. Waiting. Then the trucks started moving together. We were out of the city. The trucks picked up speed, leaving the darkness behind us. Gradually, the first silver threads of dawn appeared. Was it a journey from darkness to light? I hope so. I heard one of them ask another, "How long until we arrive?" "God willing, about 4 or 5 hours." "Oh brother, I really can't bear this all this time." I was sleeping. They woke me up and immediately sent me outside, and now I'm very cramped. What should I do? My bladder will burst. If you can't wait, I'll unzip your pants, and you can do it here in the truck. Is this reasonable? In front of all these people? Yes, it's okay. And thank God there are no women among us. Then, loudly addressing everyone, he said, hey guys, listen to me." All eyes turned to him. He explained the situation. Some muttered, some stayed silent, and some agreed. The speaker then turned his back to the restrained man, fumbled with his trousers behind his back, unzipped them, and moved away. God, relax, brother. This process repeated for times until we reached the desert prison. 5 other men vomited over a pool of urine. All the vomit was the same color. As for my neighbor, whose legs were shackled to mine, it seemed he was suffering from intestinal decay, enveloping me in a cloud of his stomach's odors. At 8 in the morning, we arrived in front of the desert prison. On the way, I kept looking at my watch. Many advised me to hide it, but where? I left it on my wrist. In front of the prison, dozens of military police officers stood. The door was small, and above it was a stone plaque with the inscription in raised black letters, "And for you, there is a punishment in life, O people of understanding." The security men opened the truck doors. They were the same ones who had treated us harshly and with cruelty, but now helped us out of the trucks with a kind of pity. One even said, "May God relieve your suffering." They spoke in whispers among themselves, avoiding eye contact with the military police officers who surrounded us in what resembled a circle. I noticed that they all had a similar stance, legs slightly apart, chest thrust backward, the left hand resting on the hip, and the right hand holding either a thick stick, a braided electric cable, or something black and rubbery resembling a belt. I later learned that it was a tank fan belt. They looked at us and the security personnel with a condescending gaze that showed disdain for the security officers and implicit threats toward us. Their movements indicated impatience with the slow processing of our handover. They shifted their weight from one leg to the other and shook their right hands with a display of annoyance and frustration. Their uniforms were all neat military attire, with the highest rank being a first sergeant, who was signing our handover forms. I read somewhere that when members of an African tribe first encountered a European, they looked at each other in astonishment and wondered, why did this man peel off his face? I imagined that the military police officers I saw before me had faces that had been peeled off. What force had peeled off these faces? How was it done? Why? Where? I don't know. But what I see is that the replacement faces don't resemble the original ones. The rest of the people are families and friends' faces. An inhuman touch ... It is invisible, true, but it is definitely there. May God grant you health. You're done. Your mission is over. This is what the military police sergeant said to the man with the glasses. They had removed our shackles, and the prisoners instinctively clung to each other. The security men left. A complete silence followed. The circle started to tighten. Come on. line them up 2 by 2. Let them in. We were led through a small door, above which was inscribed, "And for you, there is a punishment in life, O people of understanding." 2 by 2. In a long line inside a courtyard, with some trees and wildflowers in the middle and on its sides, surrounded on all sides by rooms overlooking it. The line stood in front of another sergeant, who sat behind another table. More than 100 military police officers hovered around us. All the prisoners avoided looking directly at any officer. Our heads were slight, bowed, and our shoulders were slumped. It was a posture of reverence, a posture of humility and submission. How did all the prisoners agree on this position as if we had practiced it before? I don't know. It was as if each of us was trying to hide within ourselves. I scratched my head from the back, and as everyone does when scratching their head, I extended my hand spontaneously and scratched. I heard a thunderous voice. "Hey, look at this dog. Look, he's scratching his head too." They pulled me out of the line, throwing me around with slaps and punches. A punch threw me. A slap stopped me. The fire on my neck and face made me wish I could cry a little. The sergeant called me to register, and I was the last one left. He registered me, and I became an official inmate in this prison. Once again, they led us between 2 rooms through a small iron door, smaller than the first one. Why are the doors getting smaller as we go? Through this door, we entered a large courtyard, the first courtyard. It was paved with asphalt, and all the roads and courtyards were paved with coarse asphalt. The courtyard was surrounded by 1-story buildings with sequential numbers: Dormitory 3, Dormitory 4, Dormitory 7. The doors were getting smaller, but in the first courtyard, hell opened its widest doors, and we were its fuel. Calmly and precisely, they positioned us side by side, 2 meters or 3 apart. The sergeant shouted, "Now, each of you take off all your clothes. Put your clothes on your right, and stay in just your underwear." I noticed that I was the only one wearing slips after everyone else had removed their clothes and stood waiting. I felt a sense of alienation. The assistant's voice was calm at first, but as time passed, it gradually grew louder and more intense. As the assistant's voice rose, I felt the tension and agitation increase among the police officers, and the fear and panic grew in the prisoners. They lowered their gazes and slumped their shoulders more and more. "Lower your underwear and do to security moves." I lowered my underwear to my knees and looked at the policeman, puzzled. "Do the security moves," or ... to policemen carrying whips approached me. One of them said, "How, sir, should I do ... how do I do the security moves?" "Squat and stand up twice. You're really a fool. The security moves are done in case prisoners have hidden something illegal in their rectums." One of the policemen looked at the other and smiled, saying in a low voice, "Wow, it's so small." I looked at him, then at mine. Yes, it was very small. Even it felt very scared and panicked and hid inside its sack. I couldn't hide. Behind me was a large dormitory with dormitory 5 to 6 written on its door. Next to the door, a sewer drain was open on the ground, and dirty black water flowed into it. The search ended. It was conducted with professional precision. Even the folds of the clothes, all the money and papers, any metal objects, belts, and shoelaces were all confiscated. I was barefoot, despite all this thorough searching. My wristwatch passed unnoticed. I didn't intentionally hide it. No one just noticed it. When the assistant shouted, "You dogs, each of you carries your clothes," I carried my clothes and put them on my left hand. Immediately, I unfastened the watch and hid it in the inner pocket of my jacket, feeling another sense of triumph. This is where we pause, but don't worry, we'll continue our story in the next part. Stay tuned and be sure to join us for the next part.